On a Wednesday night in March, I found a color-coded calendar on my husband's laptop that had been running for 3 years. My name was in gray. Two of our closest friends' names were in green. Green meant relationship check-in. Gray meant wife. I sat at our kitchen table for 22 minutes staring at that screen. Then I picked up my phone and started photographing everything. Let me back up. I met Dominic when I was 26. I was working as an office manager for a civil engineering firm in Columbus, and he was one of the project leads. Not my direct boss, so no HR lines crossed, but it felt a little electric anyway. He was 31, funny in a dry way, the kind of person who remembered small details. I mentioned once, in passing, that I liked lemon poppy seed muffins. 3 weeks later, he showed up at my desk with one, just one, from the bakery 2 blocks over. Not a whole box, just the one I'd said I liked. That was the kind of person I thought he was. We dated 2 years before he proposed. He got down on one knee at a state park outside Columbus, on a trail we'd hiked on our first real date in October. I cried. He cried a little too, which made me love him more. We got married in June, 4 years ago, outdoor ceremony at my aunt's property in Delaware County, 112 guests, fairy lights, the whole thing. $18,400, mostly paid by us. We were proud of that. After the wedding, we bought a house, 3 bedrooms in Clintonville, $287,000, both names on the deed. We talked about kids in the next couple of years. We had a joint checking account, a shared savings we called the Future Fund, and by the time everything unraveled, that account held $31,000. Now, the 2 friends. Marcella and Theo. I need you to understand that I thought these were my friends too. Marcella had been Dominic's friend from college, but she and I had genuinely got close, standing Sunday brunches. I was the one who drove her to the ER when she had a bad allergic reaction in 2022. Theo was someone Dominic met through a rock-climbing gym right around the time we started dating. He and his wife, Steph, came to our wedding. Steph was part of our friend group. Steph was also, as I would find out later, completely in the dark, the same as me. The first crack was so small I laughed at myself for noticing it. A Sunday afternoon in early September, 2.5 years into our marriage. Dominic got a text and tilted his phone toward his chest. Just like that. I didn't even ask about it. I filed it away and moved on. 2 weeks later, in late September, he told me he had a work thing on a Friday evening. He did those sometimes, client dinners, project wrap-up drinks, so I didn't question it. But when he got home around 11:30, he smelled like a specific restaurant. The same restaurant Marcella had mentioned earlier that week she wanted to try. I didn't connect those dots right away. I just stored it somewhere in the back of my brain. In October, he changed his phone password. He'd had the same 4-digit code for 3 years. I noticed because I tried to use his phone to look up a pizza order when my hands were full, and it didn't work. He said he'd updated it and would tell me the new one. He never did. I asked once, casually, and he rattled off 4 numbers. I tried them the next day when he left his phone on the counter. Wrong. I told myself I was being paranoid. We were happy. We laughed every day. We had a normal, active marriage. There was nothing I could point to and say, this is wrong. Just that faint background hum that I kept turning the volume down on. November is when I started actually paying attention. Dominic started having climbing nights with Theo every Thursday. He'd done that on and off for years, so it wasn't unusual, but now it was every single Thursday without exception, and he was coming home later. 9:30, consistently later than before, and when I asked how it went, his answers were flat. Good. We worked on some new routes. Dominic used to talk about Theo enthusiastically. Now when I asked follow-up questions, he shut the conversation down. In December, I checked our joint credit card statement online, something I did routinely since I handled our household budget, and I found a charge I didn't recognize. $214 at a hotel in the Short North neighborhood, on a Tuesday night in November. A Tuesday, when Dominic had told me he was working late at the office. I sat with that for a week before I said anything. When I finally brought it up, he had a whole story ready. A work colleague needed a room. His card was the only one not flagged from a prior expense report issue. Names, context, semi-plausible details. I wanted to believe him so badly that I almost did. Almost. I started screenshotting the credit card statements. I went back 4 months and found 3 other charges I'd glossed over. $67 at a wine bar in November, $43 at a flower shop in October, $180 at an experience gift company, the kind that sells cooking classes and couples spa packages, all on weekdays, all on days when I was at work or had plans he knew about. In January, I told my best friend Priya what was going on. Priya has been my closest friend since college. She works in healthcare compliance and approaches everything like she's building an audit trail. She sat with me for 3 hours on a Saturday, went through all of it, and said flat out, "This isn't a work colleague's hotel room, Nina. This is a pattern." She told me to stop confronting him with individual items. If you tip him off before you have the full picture, he'll destroy evidence and gaslight you harder. Get the full picture first. So that's what I did. I bought a small voice-activated recorder, $39 on Amazon. I kept a running log with dates and times in a locked note on my phone. I made copies of all the credit card statements going back 2 years and stored them on a cloud drive only I could access. I wrote down every inconsistency I could remember. In February, I got lucky, in the worst way. Dominic left his laptop open on the kitchen table when he went to answer the door for a food delivery. I walked past it to refill my water glass and the screen was right there, a Google Calendar tab open to an account I'd never seen, not his work email. A personal Gmail I didn't know existed. I grabbed my phone and took a quick photo before he came back. He closed the tab when he sat down and I said nothing. That photo kept me up that night. I could see names in the thumbnail. Marcella, Theo, recurring events with a green dot every 2 weeks going back at least to November. When I zoomed in, I could read a partial address for one of those November events. An address I recognized immediately. It was Marcella's apartment. I went cold when I put that together. Not dramatic cold, just quiet. The kind of quiet where your brain goes very still and very fast at the same time. The next day, while Dominic was at work, I opened his laptop. I couldn't get into his email, but I knew Google sometimes stays logged into Calendar even after you close the tab if you don't properly log out. He hadn't logged out. The calendar was right there. I spent 40 minutes going through 3 years of that calendar. I photographed every screen. Here's what I found. Dominic had been maintaining a scheduled, intentional, ongoing relationship with both Marcella and Theo, separately and together, for at least 3 years. The entries were explicit once I read them without blinders on. M, dinner and night. T, afternoon. All 3, Sunday. Recurring monthly planning entries. Entries that lined up with things I remembered, like our anniversary weekend in 2022, when he'd gone to visit his brother on the Friday before we left, so he arrived a few hours after me. That Friday had an entry. M, overnight. And then I found something else. A shared Google Doc linked from one of the calendar events, titled Us Agreements. It outlined a set of relationship agreements between all 3 of them. It used phrases like primary partner norms and boundary maintenance. Under a section called External Considerations, my name appeared. My actual name, Nina. I was referred to as Dom's legal partner, and there was a line that said, "Nina is not aware, and we have agreed this is Dom's call to manage." His call to manage. I was a logistical variable in their relationship document. I photographed every page. Then I logged out of everything, closed the laptop, and called Priya. Priya came over that evening. She went through all of it and was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You need a lawyer before you do anything else." I called a family law attorney the next morning, Diana Chen, downtown firm, $350 consultation fee, worth every single cent. She walked me through Ohio divorce law, what I was entitled to from joint assets, and told me to gather copies of all our financial documents before I said a word to Dominic. She also told me to stop using the joint account for anything personal going forward. The next 2 weeks I pulled everything. 4 years of tax returns, mortgage paperwork, investment account statements. The joint savings balance, $31,000, photographed and dated. I opened a personal checking account at a different bank and had my direct deposit split. The majority still went to the joint account, so nothing would look different, but $400 a week started going somewhere Dominic knew nothing about. I also went back through our finances more carefully. Over 3 years, Dominic had spent approximately $8,200 on things I now understood were for Marcella and Theo: flowers, dinners, hotel rooms. That experience gift charge turned out to be a couple's cooking class he took with Marcella in October. $8,200 from shared money, our money. At the end of February, I told Priya I was ready. She came over on a Saturday morning. I'd asked Dominic if we could have a check-in conversation. I used that phrase deliberately, and he agreed without any apparent concern. I had my phone recording on the kitchen table. I had a folder of printed screenshots. I laid everything out calmly. I told him I'd found the calendar, the document, the credit card charges. I told him I knew about Marcella and Theo. I told him I knew it had been going on for at least 3 years. He didn't deny it. What he said was, "I was always going to tell you. I was building up to it." I asked him how long. He said 5 years. 5 years. We'd only been together for 6. This arrangement had started when we were barely a year into dating. He proposed to me in the middle of it, married me in the middle of it, bought a house with me in the middle of it, while he and Marcella and Theo had agreements, check-in meetings, and a Google Doc with my name listed under external considerations. I kept my voice even and asked him why he married me if this is what he wanted. He said, "Because I love you and I love them. I didn't want to lose any of it." I got up from the table, walked to the bedroom, and closed the door. I called Diana from in there. When I came back out 15 minutes later, Priya was still in the kitchen. Dominic was still at the table. Priya handed him his keys and said, "You should find somewhere else to stay tonight." He left. The next week brought people I hadn't expected to hear from. Dominic got to his family first. His mom, Claudette, called me on a Monday morning and led with, "Nina, Dominic says he's been trying to work through this with you privately, and you're not giving him the chance." I told her I'd found a document in which her son referred to me as a logistical consideration. She went quiet. Then, "Relationships are complicated." I ended the call. 2 days later, a mutual friend named Ryan, low-stakes hanging out friend, someone I'd always considered neutral, texted me a long message about how Dominic was really struggling, and he hoped I would consider all the good years before making permanent decisions. Dominic had clearly gotten to him first. I didn't respond. Then Marcella texted me. I'd blocked her on social media immediately but hadn't blocked her number yet. She sent, "I never wanted to hurt you. This was always about love, not replacing you. I hope someday you can see that." I stared at that for a long time. I didn't respond. I screenshotted it and forwarded it to Diana. The person who surprised me most was Steph, Theo's wife. I reached out to her because I felt like she deserved to know, not to blow up her life, but because she was in the exact same position I'd been in and I would have wanted someone to tell me. I sent her a careful message explaining what I'd found and that Theo was involved. She called me 20 minutes later. Calm in that specific way people are when something large has just landed and their brain hasn't caught up yet. She asked me to send the calendar screenshots involving Theo. I did. She called back an hour later and the calm was gone. She told me Theo had just admitted to being in a committed triad for 5 years and that he was going to explain it when the time was right. Then she laughed, not a funny laugh, and said, "The time was never going to be right." Steph became my unexpected ally through all of this. We talked on the phone 3 times in the first week. She was behind me in the process, hadn't seen a lawyer yet, and I gave her Diana's contact information. We weren't exactly grief-sharing. It was more like we were both working through a complicated mess and comparing notes helped. Dominic, meanwhile, was staying with a work friend and sending me long emails. 4 of them over 2 weeks, explaining polyamory, explaining he'd been afraid to tell me, explaining that his love for me was not diminished by what he had with Marcella and Theo. I forwarded every email to Diana and responded to none of them. The 4th email made my jaw actually drop. He said he'd spoken to Marcella and Theo, and they were supportive of him pursuing couples counseling with me. He was asking his other partners for permission to try to save our marriage and presenting their approval as something I should find reassuring. I filed for divorce the following Monday. The legal process took several months. Dominic didn't fight the divorce itself, but the asset negotiations were exhausting. The house was the main point of contention. We'd both contributed to the down payment, $28,700 total, $17,000 from him and $11,700 from me, and we'd both been on the mortgage 4 years. In the end, the house sold, and we netted $54,000 after paying off the remaining mortgage balance. I received $31,000 of that, reflecting my down payment contribution plus an agreed equity split, with an additional $4,000 settlement for the $8,200 he'd spent on Marcella and Theo using joint funds. Diana pushed for more. Dominic's lawyer pushed back. I took what got us out cleanly. The savings account conversation was where Dominic showed his actual face most clearly. In a mediation session in May, he said the $31,000 savings account should be split 50-50 because we both built that. Diana produced 18 months of bank statements showing my contributions totaled nearly twice his. I'd been putting in $800 a month. He'd been putting in $400. He dropped it. I walked away with $31,000 from the house sale and the full $31,000 in the savings account. $62,000 total, plus a financial independence I hadn't had in years. That summer, I went to a cookout at a friend's house that I debated skipping. Priya told me not to hide, and she was right. Ryan was there, the mutual friend who texted me about considering the good years. He made a comment about how it takes 2 people to break up a marriage. I looked at him and said, there were actually 4 people in this marriage. I was the only one who didn't know it. Then I got a drink and walked to the other side of the yard. I heard later he went quiet for the rest of the night. The outcome for Dominic was not what he'd planned. Within 6 months of everything coming out, the relationship he'd built his secret life around also fell apart. Marcella, it turned out, had not been fully informed about all the agreements Dominic had made with Theo. According to Steph, who stayed in loose contact with me and eventually became an actual friend, there was a falling out between Marcella and Theo over the level of deception involved. Marcella had believed all 3 of them were working toward eventually being open about the arrangement. Theo, like Dominic, had been stalling that indefinitely. When everything came out, it fractured the 3 of them too. By September, Dominic had lost his marriage, his 2 closest partners, and the carefully managed double life, all in one implosion. He texted me once in August, "I hope you're okay." I didn't respond. I'd moved into a rental apartment in March, a nice 2-bedroom in Italian Village, $1,650 a month. I repainted the living room dark green. I got a cat named Ellis. I started a pottery class on Tuesday nights, which Priya signed us up for as a joke, and it turned out I was actually decent at it. I made a set of lopsided mugs that I genuinely love. Steph filed for divorce in April. It was finalized by October. She moved back closer to her family in Michigan. We text occasionally. She's doing okay. Priya had dinner at my apartment in November, and we talked about the whole thing, not heavily, just the way you eventually can, casually. She said something that stuck with me. She said, "You know what the hardest part really was? It wasn't even the cheating. It was that they all decided together that you didn't get to choose." That's exactly it. I could have made an informed choice if I'd known. The answer probably would have been no, almost certainly no, but I was never given the option. I was just managed, accounted for in a document I was never supposed to see. I'm 32 now. I have a good apartment and a cat and a savings account with $19,000 in it that is entirely mine. My finances are cleaner than they've been in years, because without a joint mortgage and without a partner spending $8,000 annually on other people using shared funds, I have a lot more room to breathe. I don't think about Dominic much. When I do, it's not with the gutted feeling I had that Wednesday night in March, the 22 minutes at the kitchen table staring at a color-coded calendar. It's more like looking at a scar. It happened. It's real. It doesn't hurt anymore. The wildest part, the thing I still find almost hard to believe, is that for 6 years I was surrounded by people who knew. Marcella knew every single time she sat across from me at Sunday brunch. Theo knew every time he and Steph came over for dinner. All of them decided together that my knowing was not their problem to solve. Think about that. How many people can know a truth about your own life and decide you're not entitled to it? You're always entitled to the truth about your own life. If you'd found that calendar and that document, 3 years of evidence, your name listed as a logistical variable, what would you have done? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to know.